Hello and welcome to Cinema Savvy. Finally, it feels very strange saying that again. It feels like we've been on a very long hiatus in terms of the reviews. I am still Chris, and that is still Tate. He is back, finally, at long last, from the mountains of Austria. He has returned home a hero, and he is here to help us review some movies once again. And we're backtracking with a movie that came out in February. So forgive me if my memory on it is a little hazy. You've recently seen it. You're playing catch up to a lot of movies now. You're back.
Yes, I am.
And as you can see from the title, and this is a pretty important movie to review as well, considering that Endgame is weeks away. We are reviewing the pre-Endgame movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe installments, which is Captain Marvel. We've chatted a little bit. We haven't really gone in depth, but we already know that we have very mixed opinions on this movie. Well, differing opinions.
Differing opinions, yeah.
And we're about to get into that now. So we'll give you a spoiler warning when we get to it, although there are a lot of things regarding the plot that are inherently a spoiler that haven't been shown in the trailers. So we're going to do our very best to keep it as bare bones as possible at first, and we'll let you know when we get into spoilers afterwards. So, in terms of my knowledge of Captain Marvel before the movie, before the trailer, I didn't know anything about this character. I knew the look of the character, and that was it. I know that when Brie Larson was cast, I did kind of roll my eyes a little bit. I'm not the biggest Brie Larson fan, and that will also continue into my review. I did think the character was horribly miscast. I'm not a Brie Larson fan at all.
I'd actually, I disagree with that entirely. I thought that she was actually quite charming in the role. From what I know from the Captain Marvel comics, she was pretty true to it, and it's almost like a unique smugness that she brings to the character. Almost the knowledge that she is better than most people, and that is her downfall in the end in most cases. So honestly, I thought the casting was okay, and she's a very well-seasoned actor, Oscar-winning actress.
She is indeed, but
I've loved her in performances in the past, from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Room, two very differing acting performances, and this one a completely different one as well. So I was okay with the actual casting of her, and I couldn't really think of anyone right now who could do a similar job with the same acting style, to the point where after seeing the film, I kind of saw Brie Larson's character at the end and thought, that is Captain Marvel. I didn't think that is Brie Larson playing Captain Marvel. I thought that is Captain Marvel. And that's a very good job that Marvel does with that, where they take the characters, and as soon as you see Robert Downey Jr. in other films now, you immediately go, oh, that's Tony Stark. So that's the kind of thing that Marvel brings to it, and I think they did a very good job of conveying that across for Brie Larson.
See, I kept trying to think of another actress that if I could like have my ideal casting, and she's potentially, not to say that this age that I'm about to say is old by any stretch of the imagination, but if they're looking to continue this onwards, maybe for the character, depending on the age, she might be a tad too old now, but back in the day of like Battlestar Galactica, Katie Sackhoff could have absolutely destroyed this role if she was in this. I think that she infinitely shows more range of emotion that would be necessary for this character. In fact, the character of Starbuck, you could argue, is very similar to Captain Marvel in terms of personality. And I thought that, you know, back in the day, maybe, I mean, she's 38 now. She's just shy of 10 years old.
I'll give you another suggestion that could work. Emma Stone could have worked. Bringing that unique smugness to it.
Not really.
If they're looking for a high caliber actor, because that's what they were looking for. They were looking for someone who had been experienced enough to kind of go through that, and they wanted someone who was a well-seasoned, probably even Oscar-winning actor to bring on to this project. So really, that does narrow you down to a certain few number of people who they could have picked from.
Are the number of problems with this movie in that, so on paper, I didn't know much about the character, and everyone kept saying, you know, she's the most powerful character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in Marvel in general, you could argue. Her powers are exhaustive. She's pretty much, I mean, if you've seen the trailer where she's jetting through space, that's in the movie. That's when her powers come into full, and there's like pretty much nothing that can stop her at that stage. She is immortal, for, you know, invulnerable for any stretch of the imagination. And when you've got a character like that, and when you're dealing with a character like that, and it's a very similar concept to what I had with Superman back in the day. Now, Superman is a character that I've come around to. You can write him very differently. You can make him vulnerable. But when I was an ignorant teenager and I was very much a Batman fan, I kept seeing Superman as, you know, the very boring character. He can do anything. You can't put him in any sense of peril because he's always going to get out of it unscathed.
I'd say we've seen this this film where she has been in peril, and she has come out the other side of it. And this isn't really a spoiler because we obviously need to get to Endgame. She is almost at an immortal level. She is gaining her power. She's building up, building up, building up. But you know, and I know, we've only seen one story of hers. And I'm sure that when you were younger, you would have seen like hundreds, maybe even thousands of different stories that could have been done with Superman that shows how he develops, how he builds. I think with Captain Marvel, I think she's going to be put back down on her ass when it comes to Endgame. I
really hope so.
The playing field will be leveled because Thanos is so powerful at this stage. And I think that it's very difficult to judge her being that kind of godlike creature to this point just from one film, because we've seen her vulnerable within this film. But in most superhero films, you'll see the hero become the most powerful thing towards the end of the film, and at the end of the film, basically it doesn't matter what you throw at them, they will be unstoppable. We've just been thrown a curveball by Infinity War, which showed that the heroes that always come out on top don't always come out on top. And even with this addition to the team, I still think it's going to take the whole effort of the Avengers to defeat Thanos. So at this stage, you cannot really judge Captain Marvel on being the one true thing, defining thing that's going to defeat Thanos, or at least cause a difference. I think it's going to be a multitude of things. From this film, it's a very basic, simple story. It's the hero's story. It has a couple of neat twists within it. It's very well done to be set in the past. I quite like that element. Actually, I liked seeing Samuel L. Jackson finally have, I'd say, probably his second major role in one of these Marvel films. His first one would be Winter Soldier, where I consider him to be a major character with actual major scenes. This one was quite nice, tied back into the origins, really, of him at S.H.I.E.L.D., tied back into Coulson being there. So that was really good. Villains were pretty cool. Really interesting to see that kind of dynamic with the main character all the way throughout the entire film. And I think, even though in my head I'm saying it's a run-of-the-mill Marvel film, I think it was possibly slightly above average and offered a lot to the table in various different things. First of all, for Marvel, it's like bringing forward a brand new female superhero to the front, inspiring young girls out there everywhere, inspiring young people out there everywhere, all over the place. So that's really good for the younger generation who's coming up and growing up with Marvel now. They have something to look forward to, especially after, I'd say, Infinity War would have been horrific for anyone who was younger than the age of 12 to watch if they were a fan of it. So this might give them a little bit more hope, which was quite good in that sense of the story. But overall, I was just going to say, overall, middle of the road Marvel film, slightly above average with the twists and the extra things thrown in.
Wow, you've given me a lot to go off there. I know we're on the clock here, and I know we need to keep this relatively short. And like some reviews, especially with our Marvel movies, Marvel reviews, they tend to go on for a while. I am going to probably get a lot of flack for this, but to me, I was hoping for this movie to win me over on that character ideal. So jumping off what I said about Superman, I thought was a boring character until I got to know him more. Captain Marvel, from the trailers, really weren't doing anything for me. I didn't know much about the character history. I was hoping for this movie to, make me come around on this character. And it didn't for me personally. I was magnificently bored by this movie all the way through. And when she came into her powers at the end, I didn't feel like there had been much growth there, because she's kind of powerful all the way through up until a point. And this is sort of jumping off that in terms of Brie Larson's performance. And I don't know how much of this was a fault of Brie Larson, a fault of the script writers and the directors. I found her character to be very schizophrenic in her portrayal. I know a lot of people who have read the comics say that, and a lot of complaints for the trailer, myself were included, that the character felt very flat, felt very one note, like there was no emotion there. She felt very, you know, the reverse of that. She felt very emotionless, very stoic. And a lot of people fought back and said, well, that is inherently what the character is. She comes from a warrior race, the Kree, and that's kind of instilled into them. And she's like that. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of a boring character if you're going off that. But there are moments where she does play the stoic and she does play that sort of weathered soldier kind of character. And then she's just as quippy as Tony Stark in like the same instance. And it never felt like it hit a balance. It felt like she kept flip-flopping between this characterization and it never really gelled with me as a whole.
Yeah.
And it felt a bit frenetic in that. So I never really got a sense of her character. And then by extension, when she does come into her powers, because I didn't have any love for the character or felt like I connected with her, I just didn't care by the end of it when the final action scene's going down.
I'd say I connected with the character. I feel like it did show that she did have her human side. She was the soldier scene, and towards the start of the film, you see that because there are a couple of training sequences, or one big training sequence, in fact, where she is fighting Jude Law's character to train her up, and he's telling her not to kind of suppress down the emotions, don't get them involved, because that's what brings out the energy blasts and stuff like that. That's what brings out her human character. So when she finally kind of gets to be a little bit more human, to be a little bit more down to earth, shall we say, she actually starts to shine in her character. She starts to kind of manifest into a little bit more quippy, a little bit more freedom-seeking character. As soon as it goes back to her being the soldier, it is her being the soldier. And I can see that balance. I can see why that balance was taken in this film. I can completely understand why you would say like the schizophrenic character flipping very quickly on a dime. And I feel like that's probably flipping from the situations that she's placed in within the film. She is still in training. Therefore, she's maybe not completely conditioned yet to be that very kind of stoic soldier character. And maybe she still has that humanity shining through, which is why they kind of mention it at the start to kind of keep the emotions in check and stuff like that.
Sort of going off that as well, another problem I had with the movie. So inherently, as you said, this is a new character we're being introduced to, and fundamentally, after Captain America: The First Avenger, you could argue that based on the name, and I guess this might be a slight spoiler, based on the name The Avengers, you could argue that Captain Marvel was the first Avenger, or at least the first Avenger that had any real impact as to what eventually became with the Avengers Initiative. And, you know, inherently when you're, what is this? Is this the 20th movie in the series at the moment, or 21st? I haven't been counting. Let's say 20th for the sake of argument. When you're that many movies in and you're essentially telling another origin story, to me, the directors Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck employed this to kind of pass it off that it, you know, to get around the pitfalls of it being another origin movie. I didn't like the structure of this movie at all. I think Captain Marvel is a very complex character with a lot of history, and I really disliked how it's basically told in a non-linear order, which, you know, I don't have a problem with. Batman Begins is one of my favorite superhero films.
The non-linear order did help, however, with the twists and turns that the film had. And if it was told in a straight line linear order, then it would have been completely pointless to say. The third act would have been completely pointless. So the third act is basically made by the fact that it's not in a linear order. I feel like we should probably go on before I say something spoilery to actually talk about this one key event in the film which does completely flip it on its head.
Can I want to get to that as well. Can I just finish off one last thing? So inherently for me, like, because of the structural problems, I think this movie would have benefited from a linear story. Seeing her in that flight academy, building that friendship with her friend, ending up in space, ending up with the Kree, and then going into it. I think this movie would have greatly benefited from that structure. As it is, Captain Marvel's entire character development, character arc comes from a montage of her standing up off the ground in different points of her life. That is ultimately what it comes down to. If you'd have told it in that linear story, and I have the same problem with Man of Steel as well. I know you really like Man of Steel. you don't really get a sense of the character, like, because that's told in a non-linear order. If you follow the character, like in the original Superman, for example, you follow his progression from a baby on Krypton to growing up on the Kent farm to his teenage years and angst and at school. And he doesn't become Superman until like 40 minutes into the movie. And I think this movie should have been that.
It's a different style of storytelling. And I would say it worked okay in this film. It worked okay. It isn't the best kind of sense of non-linear storytelling I've ever seen. But I honestly can't see it working as a linear story when we go into spoilers, especially with the storyline that they chose to go with in the end. It just completely wouldn't work as a linear story. It had to be told non-linear for it to work. And I guess this is where we say, please tune out if you don't want any spoilers.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm going to go and spoil a lot of things right now. For starters, I don't think it would have worked in a linear order because the plot twist would have been completely ruined, because we would know as the audience that the Kree are actually the evil ones in this film. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the start that the Kree aren't exactly the nicest of people because they're dealing with Ronan the Accuser. And that immediately sends red flags to everyone who's watching from Guardians of the Galaxy. He's not a nice guy to deal with. The fact that they're on the same side as him, always a bad start in that sense. But if it was told in that order and we knew the information that the Kree were the baddies, we'd just be kind of sitting there waiting for her to kind of figure it out. And I don't see that working as the film. I like the fact that the Skrulls were enemies to start off with, and then through the telling flashbacks and through the way that she learns about her past and the fact that she has that memory loss, because of that, she's able to figure out that actually the Kree are the ones who put her in that state, who made her the way she is, and also the reason why she has to fight, and also gives her something to fight for. Not just, I'm hunting down people to kill them because they're invading planets. I'm saving people. I'm saving refugees because I'm a good person. And that gives her the character motivation to go on with. That's the message that the film is willing to send as far as Captain Marvel is concerned and what she stands for within this hero universe. Some people are out there to just defeat their rival, like Tony Stark in literally all 3 of the films that Iron Man had. But Captain Marvel is out there saving refugees, using her powers for good instead of using them for possible evil and bad that she was in the past.
Mm-hmm. I will say I did really like that twist, actually. I thought that worked for the film. What I was expressed a negative about that before we went live.
Yeah.
My negative is, and I mean, this doesn't affect me because I haven't read any of the comic books. I don't know much about the history. As far as I'm aware, the Skrulls, and there could be versions of good Skrulls out there. As far as I'm aware, the Skrulls are kind of one of the biggest, baddest forces in the entire universe.
Pretty bad. But at the same time, you always find, like, in various different cinematic universes, you'll always find one of the baddies being a good guy for a short amount of time or even a prolonged amount of time.
This felt very genuine, though. This felt very that the Skrulls, everyone thought they were villains, but actually, you know, they're refugees. They're just looking for a home.
It will come back. I'm sure Marvel's phase 4 or 5, whatever the fuck's happening after Endgame, I genuinely think the Skrulls will come back and they'll try and do the Skrulls invasion storyline. I think that's where they're planning to go.
See, I can view it both ways. Like, let's say if they do go with this angle, I think that angle works for the movie and works for the narrative of the movie. And I actually, that was probably the biggest thing that I appreciated about the movie. If you're looking at it as a Marvel fan, did they just Mandarin the entire race of the Skrulls?
No, because it's redeemable. Because it was only a select group of refugee Skrulls that they were talking about. The ones that they were hunting down specifically were a group of refugees on a planet that had already been burned up and they were on the run. Right. They weren't fighters, they weren't generals, they were just standard Skrulls. They weren't military personnel. I feel like as soon as you get to the proper heavy-hitting Skrulls, like, then I feel like we can get a different storyline coming off that.
Yeah, no, totally. What else?
It did, however, introduce the race of them, which means that in the future, if they do become a threat, even to Captain Marvel, she might go, oh, they're going to be nice people, and then suddenly get blindsided by it, which could help to their advantage.
We need to say as well that the lead Skrull was played by longtime channel favorite Ben Mendelsohn.
Where is he? Here he is.
There he is. Look at him. That's brilliant. No, I thought he was great. He's kind of fallen into this pitfall now, not in a bad way, because he's fantastic in everything that he's in, of playing alongside Mark Strong, which I guess we'll talk about tomorrow in our Shazam review, generic movie bad guy. It's like, we need a bad guy for a movie. Mark Strong's not available. Get Ben Mendelsohn. Like, he'll do it.
Yeah, I was going to say he wasn't a bad guy in this film, and Mark Strong was not a bad guy in the Kingsman franchise. So
there are exceptions here and there. I honestly don't have much else I can say about this movie. Jumping off from what you said about Samuel L. Jackson, hands down, I thought he was the best thing in the movie. And that de-aging technology, Jesus Christ, they have it's uncanny, honestly. Like, I know I've said it every other time, every time they've used it, that it looks like they've genuinely filmed this stuff back in the 90s. But believe me when I say that you watch this performance, and maybe in like 5 or 10 years or so, you'll go back and you'll be able to see some of the, you know, the seams in the technology. But it looks phenomenal. It genuinely looks like young Samuel Jackson. So hats off to that. I thought he was the best thing in the movie, having so much fun with it. You do get a little bit of origin in there as well. Whether I like it or not is debatable, of how he loses his eye. It's very comedic and probably not what you'd expect initially from seeing Nick Fury. But I was kind of in it at that point, and I thought all the stuff with him was fantastic.
I was going to say, didn't they say that the reason why he lost his eye was it was the last time he trusted someone on a mission or something like that? He trusted the cat.
yeah. I did like the cats. I can't remember what they called it. A fur.
It was just it's just like away from me. It's just like
this giant like hentai tentacle monster just like erupts out of the cat's mouth and just starts laying waste to people. I thought that was pretty funny. What else do I have to say? I guess if I'm going into overall opinions, I'm going to kind of round it off on this as well, which is probably going to make me very, very unpopular. But I've been unpopular a lot of times on this channel, mostly related to DC stuff. But hopefully that won't be the case tomorrow when we do Shazam. Is the current state, not all, but inherently the modern cinematic equivalent of the role of like a superhero female, or just like a strong female character in general. I do think there is a problem in that genre. Not the concept. I'm not misogynist. I'm not saying that there can't be. What I'm saying is in how they handle characterization. A lot of the times, and the big two that are jumping out to me right now is Captain Marvel and especially Rey from Star Wars. Now, I know that that's an argument for a different time, and we could argue that, but this whole God mode triggered thing in that is what equals a strong female character.
I'd immediately argue against that with Black Widow. I'd immediately argue against that.
There's not much with Black Widow. We haven't had much character from Black Widow.
Fine. Good characterization from characters who don't need to be all-seeing, all-worthy. I'd say Wonder Woman wasn't exactly the strongest person in the DCEU, but somehow ends up being one of the strongest just because that's the way that she's portrayed. But I don't think it's an inherent problem. I'd say instead of that, it was an interesting way of them conveying across. And I'm sure that when we look back at the start of superheroes and stuff like that, you've got Superman and you've got his all-worthy, all-bounding from his films, kind of overwhelming powers and stuff like that. So we're entering a new kind of era of superhero films. I mean, I said 2 years ago that it was going to die out. I was completely wrong.
That's a good point, actually. With this movie, I thought that a lot of people thought this was going to be the first Marvel movie to really, really flop. And I guess it's cool that we're doing this review at this point because it's over the $1 billion threshold right now. Not to say that this means anything because movies cross the 1 billion thing all the time, but it is the 10th highest grossing superhero film of all time. It's the highest grossing female-led superhero film of all time, and it's currently the 30th highest grossing film overall. So it definitely defied many expectations, certainly my own, in terms of how much it's made and how well it's gone over with people. I guess the last thing I'll say, because this could be like a video dissertation in of itself with like female characters, but for me, female action heroines are compelling through their vulnerability. You look at the big two, Ripley from Aliens, you know, Sigourney Weaver, and Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor from the Terminator franchise. There are a lot of times in those movies where, you know, they're up against the odds. They're very vulnerable. They're not weak. Like, their strength comes from their vulnerability and the peril they're in. If you just give someone infinite power and just make them beat down everyone with no qualms or no pitfalls along the way, That's a boring character to me. And to me, that's where I view Rey in Star Wars. That's where I view Captain Marvel. Hopefully, with what you say, like one of my biggest stipulations with Endgame is I really don't want Captain Marvel to show up in the final 10 minutes of the movie and just like one punch Thanos and the movie's over.
Here's the thing. I mean, you've seen the end credit sequence from this film. There was two. The second one was kind of like not a comedy one, but you have the cat basically coughing up the Tesseract, which is how S.H.I.E.L.D. ends up in the hands of it. But the first end credit sequence basically is, I'm assuming, a scene directly from Infinity War. Maybe even the opening scene of Infinity War. That I think Endgame.
I think it will be in the first 30 minutes at least.
I think it's going to be in the first 5 minutes. I think it's going to be literally the first scene, possibly.
I did think it was funny, though, how at the end of this movie, and this ties into the end credit scene of Infinity War, how Samuel Jackson, no, she gives him the pager, right? Yeah, she gives him the pager and says, like, call me whenever you need me, essentially. It's like kind of like the bat signal, but only use it in emergencies. I'm like, well, wasn't Loki attacking New York or Ultron lifting up like a giant meteor? I guess those don't count, right?
I think she was talking about, because he knows obviously her powers are ridiculous, and you have the whole intergalactic thing. I know from a standpoint of civilian casualties and actual logic, then she should have come back and helped with the others. But right now, this is like absolute worst case scenario, and that's why she's being called upon. And I'm pretty sure she's obviously seeing it across the rest of the universe, the effects of it. And it would have been really funny if she got turned to dust. That would have been fucking hilarious. It's just like everyone hyping up, oh my god, Captain Marvel's going to say, oh, she's dust. Oh, okay.
Oh,
no. How are they going to do it now? Oh my god. Now that would have been a massive.
That would be if Rian Johnson directed Endgame. Subverted your expectations.
Absolutely. Okay, I don't really have much else to say other than the music was there. Didn't really happen.
Okay, I need to talk about one song in particular, and this isn't the orchestral score. This is the main soundtrack, and this royally pissed me off and was kind of, we get it. And again, tying into my whole like female action heroine movement, the end fight scene. Why did it need Just a Girl by No Doubt playing over the top of it? I thought that was completely on the nose, and I really got pissed off with that. The ending just turned into like a fucking music video, and I couldn't stand it. I thought that was really unnecessary and very cheap and very lame. I will say that it's amazing that what's his name, Jude Law, how they contain her powers with a small little chip at the back of her head that is easily rippable. I think they would have like hidden that better.
I never realized that she never noticed it.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like, we have to have movie. If I'm going to rank this with, I mean, this is definitely one of my least favorite Marvel movies out of all of however many movies we've had. I would probably rank this alongside the likes of Iron Man 2, Thor: The Dark World.
Oh, no.
I am never going to watch this movie again. It really didn't do anything for me.
I put it elsewhere on that list. I put it a lot higher up. I put it within the same range, as I put it somewhere between, in my head at least, 4-3, which I didn't really like that much, and Age of Ultron, which I also didn't like that much. But it's not a bad film. Both of those are good films. I just thought that they were a level below. We're talking like the not top tier, but just below the middle range tier, kind of. You know what I mean? Like the film isn't inherently bad, but when it looks at it, it's very middle of the road, very kind of slightly above average. So it's above that medium line. So I'm looking at those kind of films. Films below that medium line of quality, which I still quite like, are like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I still find enjoyment in Iron Man 2. I don't find any enjoyment in Iron Man 3 or For the Dark World. If you
we agree on, we agree on that at least.
So it goes kind of in that middle, slightly above middle range kind of area.
Last thing I'll say, this movie felt really cheap. Did it feel like a sort of direct-to-TV movie to you a little bit?
No, not even slightly.
Okay. I guess maybe it was like smaller scale. It like reminded me of sort of, obviously like the effects in there are still incredible, but I don't know. I feel like
it had a very 80s glow to it, if that helped.
90s glow.
90s glow. About late 80s, early 90s, I'd say.
No, this is 90s, man. Blockbuster video.
90s.
Yeah, it's set in the 90s. Yeah.
I always thought late 80s, early 90s even.
I think it specifically says the year, doesn't it? It's well, the end credit scene's set in 1995, so I'm assuming that this is. Yeah, no, I think this is set in the early 90s at least. Definitely the early 90s.
Having a look. Plot 1995. There you go.
Okay. The last thing Brinsley said, would you do? Well, I think this was something earlier he said in the chat. Is that do you have to see this before Endgame? Personally, I'm going to say no. Like, as long as you're aware that Captain Marvel is a thing and she has superpowers and that she left Nick Fury the GPS thing, not the GPS thing, like the bat signal kind of thing,
pager.
distress signal or whatever it is. I don't think you need to see it.
If you need to see anything, you need to see the end credit scene. So you could probably find that on YouTube soonish.
Again, because if that's a scene from Endgame, like you're gonna see that scene in the movie anyway, and then the other one's just a comedic one. All you need to know is that Nick Fury loses an eye, which is not essential information. Like you could just say that, oh, he has one eye, and how he came up with the name of the Avengers.
Brinsley, we have differing opinions here because I found it quite an entertaining story, but Chris didn't. So it's one of those, if you have the time to spare to go watch it, I'd recommend going seeing it. If you're into the Marvel machine, you kind of already on board with everything, then I'd say you definitely have to see it. But if you're kind of in the middle of the road, then I wouldn't suggest seeing it. You need to kind of be committed or at least like have the time to go see it. It's not something that I'd tell you to rush to go and see.
Yeah.
But it's something that I would still recommend seeing. If that makes sense.
I believe this breaks continuity as well, because I think in the first Thor movie, Nick Fury makes mention that Thor was the first alien they came into contact with that made them aware that there was stuff beyond our planet. I could be wrong about that, but I swear I heard that
maybe
somewhere.
He didn't say beyond our planet. Maybe he said beyond our realm.
Okay, that seems like it's split hairs a little bit there, but it was early days for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Who knew if they'd ever get to this point, but they have. And I guess that'll do it for our review on Captain Marvel. We both have very different opinions on it. I say take it or leave it. Tayte found some enjoyment in it, and that's all good. Now, one thing is for sure, though. We're both really looking forward to Endgame. This is without a doubt one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and I can't believe I'm saying about the 22nd Marvel movie. It's absolutely mental that you know, in between, like, I wasn't fond of Ant-Man and the Wasp. I wasn't fond with this movie. In all honesty, like, they could have made Infinity War and then waited a year and then bought this one out, and I would have still been as hyped for it. It's going to be insane. Now, I don't know when I'm going to see it. I don't know if I'm going to a midnight screening of it or if I'm going to try and catch it the day after. It's going to be packed. Depending on whenever I go and see it, it's going to be packed. There's the amount of screenings they've got for this movie is ridiculous, but we'll be at that movie. I think that there's George will definitely be on that as well. I know in relation to his previous video that he made, he says that he is not leaving the channel, but he's bowing out the majority of reviews. You won't see him as much, but we will still get him on for the big ones, especially Endgame and Star Wars at the end of the year.
I'm going to be seeing midnight screening if that helps. So I'm
it's going to be like 3 in-the-morning, dude. It's like a 3-hour, 2-minute movie, isn't it?
I'm doing the double bill as well, so I'm seeing Infinity War beforehand straight into it. It starts at 8 o'clock. It starts at 8.
See, I would do that, but I have seen Infinity War so many times. Like, I know that movie like the back of my hand. I don't really need to see it.
I want to see it on the big screen again.
Yeah.
So I'll probably any opportunity to see a film again on the big screen is always a good one.
Yeah.
And you should probably take it. So yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if this is the right video to do it or if I need to do like a sort of separate channel update videos to where I've been. You may notice that reactions have, well, aside from the Motley Crue movie, The Dirt, they've pretty much been non-existent. Inherently, if you want my answer here, a lot of people have been asking about when the reactions are starting up again. Post-Oscar season, I was burnt the fuck out on movies completely. The 2018 Oscars really did a number on me towards the tail end of that section into January. It's 2018, 2019, whatever you want to call them. I must have seen like 10 movies in that week in the lead up, and it just got to the point where I was already backdated on a number of trailers dating back to the Super Bowl halftime show, which I still am. And then more and more trailers came out, and it takes a long time to get those the recorded and edited and uploaded and do the thumbnails and everything like that. It does take a while, to the point where I just don't think it would have been feasible to go back all that way and do all those reactions. So I think as of right now, I'm Thanos style clicking my fingers. I'm wiping the slate clean, and I'm going to start afresh from now on. Another thing that I did talk about, and I want to get your guys' opinion, so you can leave comments down below after this review's finished, is I was thinking of moving to live stream reactions. Now, you won't have like the little window here of the trailer playing at the same time, which might not be as interesting to watch, but it's, you know, I'll still be able to talk about the trailer. You'll still get all my thoughts, my immediate thoughts. The audio will be playing through my computer. And it just means that I can get videos out in a more timely fashion. If they bring out, say, 2 or 3 trailers in a day, I can just do separate live streams and just get them all done there and then. One thing I do want to talk about, though, and I have unfortunately already seen the trailer, so you won't get a reaction to it, but I do definitely want to talk about it in depth. It's one thing I'm very passionate about, is the new Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie. Oh boy, does that movie look incredible. And I do want to do a full stream on that. So one day this week, I might jump on one and just have a general chat. If people want to tune in and talk some DC, talk some Batman, talk some Joker, I'll be more than happy to do that. But tomorrow, we will be returning for our review of Shazam. Tate, you saw it today. I saw it at the weekend.
Oh, no, I saw it yesterday.
Oh, you saw it yesterday, sorry. But we have a lot of thoughts on that, and it is the big release this week. There's still a number of movies I need to see. I still need to see Us. I still need to see Dumbo. I still need to see Pet Sematary. Hopefully, I'll be seeing them at some point towards the end of this week, and reviews will be out for those some point either at the end of this week or into next week. We're back, folks. We're back. We're still playing catch up a little bit, but it's been really good to jump on one of these again. Been good to talk about movies again. I've really missed this outlet and you guys, and it's nice to see so many of you in the comments as well, wishing us well and being there for us for the stream. So we need to take off now. Great to see everyone again, and we'll hopefully see you all tomorrow in our review for Shazam. See you guys.